Hello everyone, and welcome back to UK Homicide. Today's case is that of Louise Kam, a successful, kind, and trusting businesswoman with a long reputation for hard work and generosity. For ad-free listening, please subscribe to Apple Podcasts. Louise spent her early years in Hong Kong before moving to the United Kingdom. Although detailed public information about her early life is limited, she was described as driven, resourceful, and holding strong family values, which shaped her later success in the UK. Louise settled in the London area, where she began her professional journey. In the early years, she and her ex-husband built a successful catering business, which supplied events and high-quality service to various clients. They worked hard and long hours. Her work ethic and meticulous attention to detail made her a trusted name in her community. After years in catering, she transitioned into property investment, a move that would become her primary source of income. She strategically acquired residential and commercial properties in desirable areas of North London, namely a £1.3 million house in Barnet and a shop with 3 flats in Willesden. Her investments were well chosen, as property values in these areas continued to increase, allowing her to build significant wealth. By the time she semi-retired, Louise was incredibly affluent. She continued to oversee her properties, renting them out and keeping them well maintained. This income allowed her to focus on spending time with her family and to contemplate selling her assets to ensure financial security for her children and future generations. In January 2021, she was introduced to a man called Qusay Al-Jundi, who lived with his mother, wife and children in Harrow, and Romanian national Mohammed El Aboud. Although both men came from North London, they came from vastly different backgrounds. Al-Jundi, born on January 10, 1998, presented himself as an entrepreneur and successful restaurateur. However, much of his wealth and status were fictitious. His role as a chef at the Yasmin Sham restaurant in Willesden, a family-owned establishment, lent him credibility in his community. He was charismatic and persuasive and had a reputation for exaggerating his financial success and connections, often claiming he was involved in high-value business deals. Al-Jundi used this exaggerated image to lure investors and acquaintances, promising quick profits and high returns. His manipulation of others and talent for fabricating stories became his tools to initiate his plot against Louise. El Aboud, born on October 27, 1994, led a quieter life in comparison. He worked as a delivery driver for the same restaurant. He shared Al-Jundi's aspiration for wealth, but lacked his accomplice's cunning charisma. Friends and colleagues described him as a follower rather than a leader and easily influenced by others. Al-Jundi's promises of a better life and easy riches drew El Aboud into the scheme to defraud Louise. Al-Jundi presented himself to Louise as a wealthy restaurateur with significant financial backing. He fabricated a story about having a multi-millionaire girlfriend who was interested in buying Louise's properties for $4.6 million, a price well above market value. He convinced her she could receive the entire amount without the hassle of a lengthy transaction process by signing over ownership to him. Al-Jundi wove an intricate web of lies to appear credible, leveraging his charm and confidence to portray himself as a successful businessman. He aimed to manipulate Louise into signing over the property deeds, after which he could sell them or use them as collateral for further financial gain. Louise's family would later say she was a trusting and generous person who saw this deal as an opportunity to provide financial security for her loved ones. Al-Jundi exploited this trust, framing himself as a friend and advisor who was helping her maximize her property investments. However, as the negotiation process continued, Louise grew hesitant and began asking questions that Al-Jundi found inconvenient. She expressed concerns about transferring ownership without guaranteed payment, causing Al-Jundi to realize that his initial plan might fall apart. In response, he decided to escalate from fraud to murder to ensure he obtained her properties without any resistance and avoid legal obstacles or potential exposure by eliminating her. Though less cunning, El Aboud was similarly motivated by a desire for easy money and the lifestyle Al-Jundi promised, playing a crucial role in all aspects of this crime. Al-Jundi and El Aboud viewed Louise's murder as a calculated step in a foolproof scheme to fund lavish lifestyles and business ventures. Their motive was purely self-serving, driven by a dangerous blend of entitlement and disregard for human life. They considered Louise merely an obstacle to their ambition, rather than a person with a family and a legacy. The plan reflected an extreme level of premeditation and a willingness to go to any lengths to satisfy their greed. On July 26, 2021, Louise was lured to her Barnett property, where El Aboud was living, with the understanding she was finalizing deals with Al-Jundi. Instead, she was attacked and strangled with a hairdryer cord in an assault lasting less than a minute. This weapon was intimate, indicating premeditation and determination to kill without much evidence of violence. After killing Louise, the men went to great lengths to dispose of her body. She was wrapped in a duvet, placed in a wheelie bin, and covered with garden waste. This bin was then transported to Harrow, far from her Barnett home, in an attempt to hide the body and crime. They used her phone to text and email her friends and family, falsely claiming that Louise had traveled to China for a planned business trip. They hoped this would explain her sudden disappearance and prevent an immediate alarm. The cover-up's most disturbing part was El Aboud's social media behavior. While Louise's family desperately tried to reach her, he posted TikTok videos of himself dancing in her driveway as if nothing had happened and apparently celebrating his success. These videos, along with other mocking social media posts, painted a chilling picture of the men's attitude toward the crime they had just committed. The investigation later revealed that the perpetrators had also tampered with Louise's finances, making several fraudulent attempts to change the ownership of her property portfolio. The day after the murder, on July 27th, Louise's family reported her missing. Her daughter, who was in regular contact with her, became suspicious when her mom did not respond to messages or phone calls. They were particularly alarmed by the out-of-character texts from her phone claiming she was in China. A police investigation was quickly launched. CCTV footage showed Al-Jundi and El Aboud transporting the wheelie bin to Harrow. This discovery confirmed her murder and gave authorities concrete evidence of the two men's involvement. Inside the Barnett property where the murder occurred, forensic experts found multiple sources of evidence. Bloodstains matching Louise's DNA were discovered on the carpet, and nearby furnishings and fibers from the hairdryer cord were spread throughout, linking the murder weapon directly to the scene. The perpetrator's gloves, used in a clumsy attempt to avoid leaving fingerprints, had Al-Jundi's and El Aboud's DNA on them. Further evidence was found on Louise's car door handles and steering wheel, further establishing their responsibility. The Metropolitan Police coordinated operations on August 1, 2021, which led to the arrests of Al-Jundi at his home in Willesden and El Aboud in Barnett. During the arrests, police seized several items linked to the crime, including the clothing they had been seen wearing on CCTV, which matched the fibers found at the crime scene. During questioning, the men displayed very different behaviors. Al-Jundi initially denied any involvement, maintaining his story that he had intended to help Louise with her property transactions, and blaming El Aboud for the murder. He insisted he had no knowledge of how Louise's body ended up in the wheelie bin or why his DNA was found on the gloves and murder weapon. Conversely, El Aboud appeared more cooperative, but attempted to shift responsibility onto Al-Jundi, claiming he had been manipulated into assisting. Detective Chief Inspector Brian Howie, who led the investigation, remarked on the thoroughness and speed with which his team had been able to piece together the events leading up to Louise's death. The arrests, he said, reflected the dedication of law enforcement in pursuing justice for Louise and her family, and underscored the importance of the community's role in providing valuable information and support. This high-profile trial commenced in January 2023 at the Old Bailey, London. Al-Jundi denied murder, asserting that he was not directly responsible for Louise's death. His defense team chose not to present a substantial argument or evidence disputing the facts surrounding her death. Instead, in an aim to get a reduced manslaughter charge, they concentrated on attempting to mitigate his involvement by arguing that he was not the one who physically killed Louise. Al-Jundi chose not to testify in his defense, which meant the jury did not hear his side of the story directly. This decision may have been part of a strategy to avoid cross-examination, as the prosecution's case was strong, and any attempt to explain his actions could have opened the door to further damaging evidence. Ultimately, his decision to remain silent and not provide any alternative version of events weakened his defense considerably. It was left up to the jury to determine whether Al-Jundi's actions constituted direct involvement in the killing. Unlike Al-Jundi, El Aboud admitted his involvement in the events leading up to the murder and his presence during the attack. However, his defense focused on the idea that he had been acting under duress due to Al-Jundi's influence and control over him, suggesting that he was manipulated and intimidated into not only the murder but the subsequent cover-up. Despite claiming he was under duress, no evidence was presented to support this argument. There were no witnesses or credible testimony to support his claims of being threatened or forced into committing the crime. Moreover, the defense did not show any credible documentation or evidence that Al-Jundi had a history of coercing or intimidating El Aboud, further weakening the defense case. El Aboud's involvement in moving the body and using Louise's phone to send fraudulent messages suggested active participation, not passive involvement under duress. The prosecution's evidence of El Aboud posting on social media and making light of the situation with TikTok videos during the cover-up further undermined his defense, especially considering the coordinated actions in disposing of the body and covering up the crime. The prosecution's case against Qusay Al-Jundi and Mohammed El Aboud was robust and compelling, painting a clear picture of premeditation, deceit, and a calculated murder plan for financial gain. This proves that both men were deeply involved in taking control of Louise's substantial property portfolio, wealth, and other assets worth millions of pounds. The prosecution revealed that just 2 days before the murder, Al-Jundi purchased an incredibly expensive fireplace for Louise's property, revealing part of the strategy to solidify his claim on her property. In addition, he had been telling his mother that Louise was dying of cancer and that he would inherit her wealth, demonstrating his long-term plans to secure her assets. The evidence and their subsequent actions demonstrated awareness of the severity of their crime and their desire to avoid being caught. Betrayal of trust was highlighted. Al-Jundi manipulated her into believing he was helping her financially, and Louise trusted them with her life and assets. They made it clear that the crime not only robbed Louise of her life, but also caused immense emotional and psychological harm to her family and loved ones. To summarize, the prosecution's case against Qusay Al-Jundi and Mohammed El Aboud was based on clear evidence of premeditation, deceit, and brutality. Both defendants were shown to be involved in a carefully coordinated plan to murder Louise and take control of her properties and wealth. In victim statements, Louise's sons, Gregory and Anthony, delivered emotional victim impact statements during the sentencing phase. Gregory said, "I deeply regret that I wasn't able to do more to protect my mother from the lies and deceit of these men. She was a kind and trusting woman, and they exploited that in the worst possible way." Anthony Kam expressed his disbelief that such a horrific crime could happen to someone like his mother, who had worked hard her entire life and deserved peace in her later years. On February 1, 2023, Judge Mark Lucraft KC sentenced Al-Jundi and El Aboud to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 35 years. His sentencing remarks were scathing and underscored the premeditated and callous nature of the crime. I will attach the full report to the description. His remarks emphasized the premeditated nature of the crime and the extreme cruelty shown by the two defendants.
On Thursday, the 19th of January 2023, you were convicted by the jury of the murder of Louise Kam, and I must now sentence the two of you. From the time you were first put in touch with Louise Kam earlier in 2021, Al-Jundi, you told her lie after lie. You claimed to be a person of means, with the backing of a multi-millionaire girlfriend, who was going to fund the acquisition of her properties at a level in excess of the market value. Al-Jundi, you did not give evidence in the trial. Your case was that, in effect, El Aboud was the killer. El Aboud, when you gave evidence in the trial, you sought to blame Al-Jundi. The two of you have rightly been convicted on compelling evidence. In my judgment, and taking into account all the aggravating and mitigating factors I have identified, the appropriate minimum term here is one of 35 years. You may go down.
Reaction from law enforcement detective Chief Inspector Brian Howie, who led the investigation, praised the sentencing as a reflection of justice being served. This was a despicable, calculated, and callous crime carried out by two young men against an elderly woman who placed her trust in them. This sentence ensures they will spend a significant part of their lives behind bars. Both Qusay Al-Jundi and Mohammed El Aboud were transferred to maximum security prisons following their sentencing. Their minimum 35-year terms mean they will not be eligible for parole until at least 2058, at which point they will both be in their 60s. Inside prison, both men will face challenges typical of inmates convicted of high-profile violent crimes, particularly those involving the exploitation and murder of vulnerable individuals. Prison authorities will often segregate inmates like Al-Jundi and El Aboud from the general population, both for their safety and to prevent conflicts. Both men must adapt to strict daily routines, including assigned work duties, limited family visits, and restricted communication with the outside world. Given the brutality and greed-driven nature of their crime, public sentiment towards their rehabilitation prospects is low. Before we look at Louise's positive legacy, let's summarize the main events timeline. January 2021, Louise Kam meets Qusay Al-Jundi through a mutual acquaintance. Al-Jundi claims he has access to wealth through a fictional, multi-millionaire girlfriend, and expresses interest in purchasing Louise's properties. February to June 2021, Al-Jundi continues to court Louise with promises of a lucrative property deal, gradually convincing her to prepare for a sale. Meanwhile, he begins orchestrating his plan to defraud her of her assets. On the morning of July 26, 2021, Louise drives to her Barnett property to meet with Al-Jundi, believing they will finalize the sale. He is joined by El Aboud, who lures her inside under false pretenses. On the afternoon of July 26, 2022, Louise is attacked and strangled with a hairdryer cord. After killing her, the two men wrap her body in a duvet and place it in a wheelie bin. In the late hours of the same day, footage captures both men moving the wheelie bin containing Louise's body to Harrow. The day after, on July 27, 2021, Louise's family, unable to reach her and concerned by her uncharacteristic disappearance, reported her missing to the Metropolitan Police. An investigation immediately focuses on her recent interactions and property dealings. On July 28, 2021, Louise's black BMW with incriminating DNA and fingerprints was abandoned in Edgware. Between July 29 and 31, 2021, police examined CCTV footage from multiple locations, documenting Louise's and the suspect's movements. Investigators also conducted further forensic tests on the Barnett property, Louise's car, and the wheelie bin. On August 1, 2021, police arrested Qusay Al-Jundi and Mohammed El Aboud. Both men attempted to shift blame onto each other during questioning, but the evidence against them was overwhelming. Between August and December 2022, the Metropolitan Police and Crown Prosecution Service prepare for court. The trial begins at the Old Bailey in January 2023. Prosecutor Oliver Glasgow KC presents evidence of the murder plot, including Al-Jundi's attempts to defraud Louise and the forensic proof of their violent actions. The defense for both men argues that each was manipulated by the other. On February 1, 2023, both men were found guilty of murder. Judge Mark Lucraft KC sentences them to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 35 years, condemning their actions as motivated by greed and brutality. Louise Kam's funeral, which took place in Potters Bar, Hertfordshire, gave her family, friends, and community time to grieve and celebrate the life of a beloved mother, friend, and community figure. The service was intimate yet poignant, reflecting the profound loss those who knew Louise felt. Her two sons, Gregory and Anthony, delivered emotional eulogies, remembering their mother as a kind, selfless, hardworking woman dedicated to supporting her family. Gregory spoke about her sacrifices to provide them with a better life, saying, "She worked tirelessly to ensure we had every opportunity and always put our needs above her own." Anthony shared memories of his mother's generosity and warmth, stating, "She was the type of person who would help anyone in need. She had so much love to give, and her kindness touched so many lives." The funeral was conducted with traditional elements, including prayers and hymns that reflected Louise's faith and values. Floral tributes surrounded the casket, with many mourners choosing arrangements symbolizing peace and eternal love. After the service, Louise was laid to rest in a private burial ceremony attended by close family members. The burial site was adorned with flowers and personal mementos, including a photograph of Louise and tokens from her grandchildren, reflecting their family love and connection. Louise Kam's legacy resonates in profound and broader contexts. This case contributed to ongoing conversations about safeguards in property transactions and financial dealings. Advocacy elder abuse groups have used her story to encourage greater public awareness and debate about the dangers of emotional manipulation and deceit. National campaigns have been launched to address these issues, and support organizations have seen increased attention and funding. Whilst this case was primarily about fraud, it also illuminated how fraud can intersect with emotional abuse and domestic manipulation. The perpetrators did not just deceive Louise financially, but used her trust to exploit her emotionally. This brings to light the complexity of emotional abuse as a form of manipulation that can accompany financial exploitation, especially when victims feel isolated and dependent on those around them. Advocates for domestic abuse survivors have pointed out that emotional manipulation can be as damaging as physical violence. Experts have pointed out that harsh sentencing is a step in the right direction in ensuring justice by helping to create a more substantial legal precedent for holding perpetrators of elder abuse, fraud, and murder accountable. Her story has become a cautionary tale about the dangers of trusting the wrong people. Thank you for listening to Louise Kam's story. Her story lives on in the hearts of her family and friends who continue to focus on her kindness, integrity, and generosity. Until next time, take care, stay safe, and look out for each other.